Chapter 1. The Beginning of Trust. Mark and I had everything a couple could dream of. After 2 years of being together, he got down on one knee and proposed to me at the beach where we first met. He was the kind of man anyone would hope for, with messy brown hair, a warm smile, and hands always busy creating delicious meals because he was a chef. I remember how he always said, happiness was seeing me smile after every meal he made. Our life was simple but full of love. We had just gotten engaged and moved into a small but charming apartment in the heart of the city. I worked at a small bookstore in town, where I could be surrounded by stories and pages that never seemed to end. And Mark? He made me believe that fairy tales could come true. My younger sister, Anna, was our frequent guest. She was someone I was always proud to introduce to everyone. She was a fitness trainer, full of energy, with a toned body and bright eyes ready to take on the world. Anna and I had always been close. She often protected me from trouble when we were young, and I trusted her with my whole heart. But life doesn't always go as planned. Just when I felt happiest, I started feeling tired all the time. At first, I thought it was just work stress, but soon, the pain spread all over my body. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The doctor's diagnosis was like a punch to the gut, lymphoma. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me, and I couldn't believe my body had betrayed me like this. Mark and Anna stayed by my side through those first painful days. I didn't want to leave our new home, but the doctors insisted I needed long-term treatment in the hospital. Before I left, I took Anna's hands and begged her to take care of Mark and help him through this tough time. "Don't worry, sis," Anna smiled and promised. I trusted my sister because, in my heart, she was the most reliable person I knew. Chapter 2. Hell in the Hospital. The hospital became my entire world. A place of sterile white walls, the smell of antiseptic, and the endless hum of machines. Time blurred as days turned into weeks. The treatments were harsh, leaving me weak, nauseous, and desperate for any reminder of normal life. I clung to every small comfort, a quick phone call from Mark, visits from Anna, and the hope that one day, I'd leave this place and pick up where life had paused. At first, Mark visited often. He'd bring flowers, tell me stories about work, and hold my hand through the pain. But slowly, his visits became less frequent. He must be overwhelmed, I whispered to myself, forcing down the bitter loneliness that crept in during the quiet hours. Anna was there, though, smiling brightly, telling me stories about how she and Mark were making things work at home. "He's holding up," she'd say, and I would smile weakly, grateful that they had each other. In those bleak days, there was one constant presence: James, my ex-boyfriend. He would visit, often unannounced, bringing small gifts, a book, a snack, or flowers that were never as bright as the ones Mark used to bring. "Just thought I'd check in," he'd say, his dark eyes searching mine. He'd sit with me, making sure I smiled even on the worst days. I knew he cared, perhaps too much. But every time he lingered a bit too long or looked at me with that old familiar spark, I'd pull back. "We're just friends," I'd tell him. I had to keep that line clear. James had always been a part of my story, though never in the way he wanted. We met years before I knew Mark, back when I thought love was supposed to feel like a whirlwind. James was confident, magnetic, and relentless. He pursued me with an intensity that made me feel special, like the center of his world. At first, I enjoyed the attention, the gifts, and the way his dark eyes would light up whenever I entered the room. But something about it felt overwhelming, even suffocating. I couldn't see myself building a life with him. Everything always felt too intense, too fast. When I told James we were better off as friends, his smile faltered but never fully disappeared. He accepted it, or at least pretended to. Then came Mark. He was different, calm, patient, with a warmth that wrapped around me like a soft blanket. Where James had burned bright and fierce, Mark offered steady light. I fell in love with him slowly, deeply, and when we became a couple, I knew it was right. But I also knew it hurt James. To him, Mark wasn't just the man I chose. He was a rival who had taken something he wanted more than anything. I remember the way James looked at Mark during the rare times they met. There was a tension that couldn't be ignored. A polite smile hiding something far darker. Over time, James faded from my daily life. He dated other people, seemed to move on, but the way he showed up whenever I needed a friend made me wonder if his feelings had ever truly disappeared. Chapter 3. Coming Home and the Shock. 3 months of painful treatments and endless waiting had finally come to an end. My condition had improved enough for me to be discharged. I felt fragile, but there was a spark of hope burning inside me. I was going home. The thought of seeing Mark again made my heart race. I'd missed him more than words could say. I decided not to tell anyone I was coming back. I wanted to surprise him, to show up, wrap my arms around him, and forget the nightmare I'd been through. As I made my way up the stairs, each step felt like it was leading me closer to the life I had missed so dearly. I unlocked the door softly, expecting to find Mark sitting at the table, or maybe cooking like he used to. But when I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. The apartment was transformed. Candles flickered, flowers adorned every surface, and there was soft music playing. My heart raced, thinking, could it be for me? Could this be the moment he finally proposes again? But then I heard laughter. Not just any laughter. Anna's laughter. I walked further in, feeling the walls close in around me, and there they were. Mark, down on one knee, holding the ring he once gave me, and Anna standing before him with tears in her eyes. I couldn't breathe. My world shattered in an instant. Mark! Anna! I managed to choke out, my voice barely more than a whisper. They turned, both of them caught off guard. For a moment, guilt flashed across Anna's face, but she quickly averted her eyes. Mark stood, his expression hardening. You shouldn't have come like this, he said, as if I were the intruder. What is this? I stammered, feeling my chest tighten. Mark's voice was steady, almost cold. It's not what you think, he began. But then he paused, as if weighing his words. No, maybe it is. I didn't want it to happen like this, but it's the truth. I'm with Anna now. I shook my head, disbelief turning to rage. That's my ring. You said I couldn't wear it because of the treatments. You said it was for safekeeping. It was, he replied, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. Shame? Regret? But things changed. I changed. While you were gone, I tried to hold on. I really did. But the more I tried, the more it hurt. And Anna, she became my lifeline. I felt like I'd been struck. Anna? My sister? Mark nodded, his eyes flickering with something raw. With Anna, I felt things I'd never felt before, not even with you. She was more than comfort. She was destiny. Being with her made everything make sense, in a way I didn't even know I needed. I turned to Anna, desperate to find some trace of the sister I had trusted. How could you? Anna met my eyes, her own filled with tears. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said, her voice shaking. I was trying to help, to keep things together for you. But somewhere along the way, we connected. It wasn't planned. Mark stepped closer, as if his words could somehow justify the pain. With Anna, I felt alive again. I didn't realize how much I needed that until she was there every day. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Alive? I repeated bitterly. You felt alive while I was barely surviving? His expression hardened again, as if trying to convince himself as much as me. You were gone, and every day I thought I was losing you. Anna gave me hope when I had none. She reminded me that there was more to life than waiting for the next piece of bad news. I felt like the ground had opened beneath me. So you just gave up on me? I whispered. I didn't want to, he said, his voice low. But I did, and I'm sorry. Then, as if to seal his words, he wrapped his arms around Anna and held her tight. She buried her face in his chest, and for a moment, it was as if I didn't exist. Don't, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Not like this. But neither of them looked at me. Their world had closed around each other, and I was left standing alone, drowning in the reality of their betrayal. Chapter 4. James's Declaration. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the suffocating silence. What the hell is this? I turned to see James standing in the doorway, his eyes blazing with fury. He must have come to check on me, knowing I'd left the hospital on my own. For a second, I felt a wave of relief, like a lifeline tossed into a stormy sea. But that relief was short-lived as James stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Mark and Anna. "So this is what you've been doing while she's been fighting for her life?" James spat, his voice trembling with anger. "You're a coward, Mark. And you," he turned to Anna, his eyes narrowing. "You betrayed your own sister." "James," I whispered, but he didn't hear me. He was already striding across the room, stopping just inches away from Mark. The tension crackled like a live wire. Mark didn't back down. He crossed his arms, a cold smile playing on his lips. "This isn't your business, James." "It's more my business than you think," James shot back, his jaw clenched. He turned to me, his expression softening. "You don't deserve this. You never did." He took a deep breath before turning back to Mark. "She deserves someone who'll fight for her, not someone who runs to the nearest comfort. I'll marry her. I'll show her what real love is." The room fell silent, the air thick with shock. I stared at James, unable to process what he had just said. Marry me? We hadn't been together for so long, and now he was here, declaring his love like a knight in some twisted tale. Mark let out a hollow laugh. "Is this a joke? You think you can just sweep in and fix everything with empty promises? You're pathetic. Better pathetic than a liar," James shot back. "At least I know what loyalty is." Anna stepped forward, her eyes filled with something between anger and pity. "Stop it," she said, her voice low. "All of you need to stop pretending. Love isn't something you can force or fake. Mark and we didn't plan this, but it's real. I'm sorry if it hurts, but you need to accept it." "Real?" I choked out, my voice trembling. "How can you say that? You destroyed everything." Anna's eyes hardened. "You can't make someone love you, no matter how much you want it. I wish it hadn't happened this way, but pretending won't change the truth." I wanted to scream, to fight back, to make them understand how deeply they'd cut me, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of lead, my heart shattered beyond repair. James reached for my hand, his grip firm and warm. "You don't have to stand here and take this," he said softly. "I'm here. I always have been." But even his touch couldn't heal the gaping wound inside me. Mark and Anna had made their choice, and I was left to pick up the pieces. Chapter 5. Living in Pain. I didn't know why I begged them to stay. Maybe it was desperation, some foolish hope that if I stayed close enough, I could mend what was broken. Mark didn't protest. He simply looked at me with weary eyes and nodded, as if my presence was no more than a shadow that lingered in the corners of his life. Anna's silence was louder than any words. She crossed her arms, her lips pressed tight, and then walked away. I should have left right then and there, but I stayed. Living with them was like being trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The apartment that once felt warm and full of love became a prison. Anna took control of everything, and it was clear that she relished every second of it. "You want to stay?" she sneered one day, tossing a mop into my hands. "Then make yourself useful." Every day was a test of endurance. I scrubbed floors, cooked meals, washed dishes, anything to keep myself from falling apart. Anna watched, always finding something wrong. "You missed a spot," she'd say coldly. "Do it again." She made sure I never forgot my place. To her, I was no longer a sister. I was the help. And Mark? He said nothing. He moved through the days as if I didn't exist, his affection for Anna on full display. Every laugh, every touch, every glance between them was like salt on an open wound. One night, I walked into the living room to find them curled up together on the couch. Mark whispered something in Anna's ear, and she laughed, her head resting on his shoulder. I stood frozen, unable to look away. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Mark glanced up, saw me, and then turned back to Anna, pressing a kiss to her forehead, as if I were nothing more than a ghost. Tears burned in my eyes, but I couldn't cry. Not here, not in front of them. I turned and walked back to my small, dark room. The walls felt like they were closing in, pressing down on me. I clutched my pillow and bit my lip to keep from screaming. Every night was the same. I lay in bed, listening to their laughter, the sounds of their lives intertwining, while I lay broken and forgotten. It only got worse. Anna made sure of it. She left notes reminding me of chores, criticized everything I did, and once when Mark was out, she leaned in close and whispered, "You should just leave. He doesn't love you. He never did." I tried to block out her words, but they seeped into my mind, poisoning what little strength I had left. The worst moment came one evening. I walked into the kitchen, my arms full of groceries, only to see Mark lift Anna onto the counter and kiss her deeply. They didn't stop, didn't even acknowledge me. It was as if I had become invisible. Something inside me shattered beyond repair. I dropped the bags and stumbled back to my room, the weight of everything crushing me. I pressed my hands to my chest, trying to hold myself together, but it was no use. I broke down, sobbing until there was nothing left. Chapter 6. Determined to avenge. There comes a point when pain turns into something else, something colder, sharper. The tears had dried, the begging was over. All that was left was a burning need to take back the pieces of myself they had broken. I didn't know if it was revenge or self-preservation, but it gave me purpose. I would not be their victim anymore. If Mark and Anna thought I would quietly disappear, they were wrong. It started with small things. I moved silently through the apartment, pretending to be the ghost they wanted me to be. I did my chores, kept my head down, and made sure not to draw attention. But every moment I was awake, I watched. I listened. I waited. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, I noticed Mark's phone lying on the table, unlocked. I hesitated for only a moment before picking it up. My hands shook as I read the messages between him and Anna. The words were like poison, proof of every betrayal, every cruel thing they'd done behind my back. I took screenshots, sending them to my own phone. This was only the beginning. Late at night, while they slept in the room that used to be mine, I started setting up small recording devices, hidden microphones and a camera tucked neatly into a bookshelf. I captured everything. The cruel words Anna spat at me when Mark wasn't around, the dismissive way Mark treated me, and their whispered conversations about how pathetic they thought I had become. The recordings were painful to listen to, but each one strengthened my resolve. I kept a journal of every insult, every humiliation, every time they acted like I didn't exist. When Anna threw a glass at me in a fit of rage for forgetting to clean the dishes, I pressed record on my phone. When Mark ignored my presence completely, even when I was inches away, I captured his coldness. These moments, once unbearable, became ammunition. There were times I doubted myself. Was this who I wanted to become? A shadow, skulking in corners, recording every move? But then I remembered their laughter, the way they flaunted their happiness, and the pain would flare up again, stronger than ever. I reminded myself that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming power they had stolen from me. I had let them break me once, but it would not happen again. As the days went by, the evidence piled up. I stored the recordings and videos in hidden folders, double-checking every detail. This was no longer just survival, it was preparation. I was building a case, a record of every moment they tried to tear me down. And when the time was right, they would know what it felt like to lose everything. I would make sure of it. I looked in the mirror one night, catching a glimpse of the person I was becoming. There was no fear, no tears, only determination. The woman staring back was someone they had created. Now they would have to face her. Chapter 7. Destroying their careers. Once I had enough evidence, I knew it was time to strike, but revenge wasn't going to be impulsive or reckless. It would be methodical, precise. I wanted Mark and Anna to feel the same helplessness they had made me endure, to see everything they built crumble before their eyes. The first step was simple: make sure the right people heard the truth. Mark was a renowned chef at one of the city's most prestigious restaurants, but I knew how fragile reputation could be. I sent everything, anonymously, to the restaurant's owner and key stakeholders. Within days, word spread like wildfire. Mark came home one evening, his face pale, eyes dark with fury. "They suspended me," he spat, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Someone accused me of inappropriate conduct." He threw the words like venom, fists clenched. Anna tried to comfort him, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. They knew their perfect world was cracking, but I wasn't finished. Anna's job as a fitness instructor at a gym came next. I recorded her belittling me, mocking my struggles in the cruelest ways. She had built her career on an image of positivity and motivation, one that I knew would shatter if the world saw her true face. I sent the recordings to her manager, along with testimonials that painted a very different picture of the woman they thought they knew. The fallout was immediate. Clients canceled sessions. The gym's reputation was at stake, and Anna became a liability. She was suspended pending an investigation. Watching her return home, defeated and panicked, gave me a grim satisfaction. For once, she wasn't the one in control. Days turned into weeks. Both of them struggled to find work elsewhere, but every time a new opportunity appeared, I made sure it slipped away. I sent files to prospective employers, highlighted their toxic behavior, and ensured that doors kept closing in their faces. Their frustration grew, turning into anger that they directed at each other. Arguments erupted daily, their voices echoing through the apartment. The bond they once flaunted so proudly was cracking. Chapter 8. James's game. Revenge can be a long, twisted game. I had my evidence and I had hurt Mark and Anna's careers, but the fire inside me wasn't quenched. It was James who suggested the next move, a wicked gleam in his eyes. "You want them to break?" he said, leaning in close. "Then let's show them what betrayal really feels like." I didn't know how far I was willing to go, but James seemed ready to play the part. I nodded. It was time. James was always charming, and Anna had been drawn to him once before. Now, he turned his attention to her, with a renewed intensity. He made sure to run into her at places she frequented, always offering a smile, a quick joke, and a hint of something more in his gaze. It didn't take long for Anna to respond. She was vulnerable, her confidence shaken by everything happening around her. James was a lifeline she didn't realize was wrapped in thorns. I watched from a distance as James wove his web. It started with innocent coffee meetings, then long walks in the park. Anna's laughter returned, and I saw her leaning into James's touch more and more. She was being drawn in, just as he intended. Meanwhile, Mark's state was deteriorating. He was barely holding on to what little remained of his reputation, bouncing from one failed job interview to the next. Each rejection pushed him further into despair. Anna's growing distance didn't help. She began spending more nights away, claiming she needed space to think or fresh air to clear her mind. But we all knew where she was going, and with whom. Mark grew suspicious. His frustration was palpable. "Where were you?" I heard him demand one night as I stood in the shadows. Anna brushed him off with cold indifference. "Don't try to control me," she snapped. "I have my own life." Their arguments grew louder, more frequent. James was doing his job well, and Anna was falling deeper into his trap. She started dressing up more, carefully applying her makeup before leaving. Mark noticed every detail, every change, and the cracks in their relationship widened. While Anna was out with James, I found myself alone with Mark more often. At first, he barely spoke to me, keeping his distance as if I was a reminder of everything he wanted to forget. But one night, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of whiskey in front of him. His eyes were hollow. "She's slipping away, isn't she?" he muttered, not even looking up. I didn't answer at first. I let the silence hang between us, heavy and suffocating. "Maybe," I said finally. "Maybe you're losing her the same way you lost me." He flinched at my words, the weight of guilt and anger mixing on his face. I saw a flicker of something, regret perhaps, before he buried it under a mask of indifference. "You think I care?" He spat, but his voice was weak. This was the opening I needed. I started planting seeds of doubt. Small comments, offhand remarks about Anna's absence or James's charm. "She seems happier these days," I'd say casually. Or, "It must be nice to have someone who makes her smile." Each word was a drop of poison, and I watched it eat away at him. James continued his game, growing closer to Anna. She was blind to the manipulation, lost in the thrill of attention. Mark's jealousy festered, his temper flaring more often. The bond they once flaunted was unraveling, and I was there to witness every bitter moment. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, pushing them to the edge, but revenge demanded sacrifice, and I was ready to see how far they would fall. Chapter 9. The Breaking Point. One evening, James brought a small hidden camera to me, a smug smile on his face. "She won't see it coming," he said, his voice low. "This is what you wanted, right?" I smiled. Over the next few days, James captured everything: secret meetings with Anna, her laughter, her touch, her betrayal in full view. Each recording was a knife in Mark's back, and I held the blade. When the time was right, I gathered all the evidence: videos, audio recordings, every damning moment I could collect. This was it, the moment that would bring their world crashing down. I chose my time carefully. Late one night, I found Mark alone, nursing a drink, his eyes glazed and unfocused. "We need to talk," I said, placing the recordings on the table. He glanced at them, then at me, confusion flickering across his face. "What is this?" "Watch," I whispered, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. He pressed play, and the room filled with the sound of Anna's laughter, laughter meant for someone else. The images showed everything: her and James, closer than any sister and ex-boyfriend should ever be. At first, Mark was silent, his jaw tightening with each passing second. But then, he erupted. The glass in his hand shattered as he threw it against the wall. This can't be real." "It's real," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "You wanted her, Mark. Well, here's the truth." His breathing was ragged, eyes wild with disbelief and rage. "Where is she?" he demanded, pushing past me. "Where is she?" I didn't have to answer. The door creaked open, and there stood Anna. She took one look at the shattered glass, at Mark's twisted expression, and knew. "You showed him, didn't you?" She spat at me, her face a mask of fury. Mark turned on her, his voice shaking. "Is it true, Anna? All of it?" She crossed her arms, defiance flashing in her eyes. "What if it is?" she said coldly. "You think you're the only one who can move on? You think I'm just going to stand by while you fall apart?" The argument exploded. Words turned to screams, accusations flew like daggers. "You're a liar!" Mark shouted, stepping closer. "You used me. You both did." Anna's eyes flashed with contempt. "Used you? Look at yourself. You're nothing but a pathetic, unemployed mess. What did you expect? That I'd stay by your side while you spiraled?" The rage reached its peak. Mark lunged forward, and Anna met him head-on. They grappled, a storm of limbs and shattered glass, their relationship unraveling with every strike. I stepped back, numb, as the chaos unfolded before me. This was what they had created, a cycle of betrayal and pain, now destroying them from the inside out. When it was over, they were both breathing heavily, bruised and broken. The silence was deafening. Mark looked at me, his eyes hollow. "Is this what you wanted?" he asked, his voice raw. I smiled. Chapter 10. The Birth of a Devil. Everything had fallen apart. The apartment that once felt like a warm home was now nothing but the ruins of broken promises and betrayed love. Mark and Anna sat there, exhausted and defeated, amidst the wreckage of their lives. James and I stood watching, like outsiders bearing witness to the collapse of a story we were once a part of. For a brief moment, there was satisfaction, the price they paid for their betrayal. But that satisfaction was as hollow as their lies. "Serves them right," James said with a cold smile, his gaze fixed on Anna. "Did you really think she'd let this go?" I remained silent, my eyes never leaving Mark and Anna. They had once been everything to me, and now they were nothing but traitors. I gathered the few belongings I still had in the apartment. Each item I picked up reminded me of a past I once cherished and now wanted to bury. When I stood in front of Mark one last time, I met his empty stare head-on. "You destroyed everything," I said, my voice ice-cold. "I'll make sure neither of you ever forgets it." Mark lowered his head, unable to respond. Anna glared at me, her eyes burning with anger and contempt. But deep down, I saw a flicker of fear. Outside, James was waiting. He seemed lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. It's over, he said, his voice low. I have nothing left to worry about. I replied to him softly, this is only the beginning. From now on, I would be the nightmare that haunted them, until nothing remained but ashes.